안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기는 야간 근무했습니다. 어저께. 일할 때는 별로 안 졸렸는데 퇴근하고 오니까는 갑자기 미친듯이 피로가 몰려옵니다. 스트레칭하고 빨리 팔굽혀펴기 좀만 하고 쉬겠습니다.
It's just so, of all the things that have shocked me over the last 4 years, it's really that, what you're talking about. Senators, I believe, make about $175,000 a year, and they get free parking at National Airport in Washington, D.C. The way people have allowed themselves to be debased, the way they've abased themselves for $175,000 and free parking at National Airport. Never thought I'd see that.
Tom Friedman, appreciate it. Thank you.
You bet.
Coming up next, more breaking news, new reporting in the Washington Post on Rudy Giuliani, election misinformation of the Russians. Also, former President Obama now speaking out against roadblocks to voting. We'll speak to Colorado's Secretary of State as well about record early voting in her state. We'll take a look at how that's going.
We had this dream to fly a solar sail spacecraft.
The ocean and the atmosphere are continually connecting everything together.
Humans and technology must work together.
I'm Nikki Shields for CNN Saved by the Future, where the biggest names in science and tech spotlight innovative breakthroughs that could change our future world and even transport us beyond it.
Saved by the Future, Saturday on CNN in association with Hyundai.
Coronavirus is affecting an entire country, the world. Are we ready? In the beginning of outbreaks like this, nobody knows what's happening. We're determined to keep reporting the story. These are the moments where our humanity really does shine through. That's the hardest part.
It's heart-wrenching.
Not just on JG, to CNN.
تحياتنا للأصدقاء في النجوم. يا ليت يجمعنا الزمان.
If we could introduce ourselves to an alien life form, what would we say?
Hello from the children of planet Earth. Здравствуйте, приветствую вас.
What you're doing is something very important. You are trying to make contact with a civilization.
Both voyagers carry a copper phonograph record. A message. Celebrating the sights and sounds of Earth.
I was looking for images for 100 different topics. Agriculture, families, science, medicine. Sports was only one, that if you were to choose one sporting event that was beautiful and perhaps most representative of humanity, it would be the Olympics. And if you were to choose one athletic that was basic to all sports, probably running.
And what if the athletes chosen to represent humanity were never told? They didn't learn the truth until decades later. This will outlive our planet. I just wonder how you feel about that.
Wow! It's just not something that you can wrap your mind around. But your heart can and your imagination can.
Coronavirus. To get daily news updates in your inbox, sign up for the CNN newsletter. Coronavirus. Fact versus fiction.
We have more breaking news tonight. There's new reporting in the Washington Post. The headline, White House was warned Giuliani was target of Russian intelligence operation to feed misinformation to Trump. Continuing from the Washington Post story, quote, the warnings were based on multiple sources, including intercepted communications that showed Giuliani was interacting with people tied to Russian intelligence during a December 2019 trip to Ukraine, where he was gathering information that he thought would expose corrupt acts by former Vice President Joe Biden and his son Hunter. The Post, Shane Harris, chairs the byline. He joins us tonight. It's a fascinating article. Can you just explain the crux of your reporting?
Well, the crux of it is that when Rudy Giuliani went to Ukraine in early December of last year, and remember, this is as President Trump is facing down the barrel of impeachment, Rudy was over there talking to Ukrainians to dig up dirt on the Bidens. These individuals, it was known to U.S. intelligence, were actually Russian assets. These were people who were connected to the Russian government, and U.S. intelligence determined that they were likely feeding disinformation, false information, to Rudy Giuliani, hoping he would take it back to the president and kind of inject it into the bloodstream of the debate back in the United States. This set off essentially a collective panic, our sources said, at the top reaches of the national security community and the administration, when leaders realized that Rudy was coming back to essentially hand Kremlin propaganda to the president, and a decision was made to try and intervene and tell the president, in more or less words, you can't listen to what Rudy Giuliani is telling you. He is feeding you disinformation, and don't listen to what he says.
And who had the task of actually doing that with the president, and how did it go?
That fell to the National Security Advisor, Robert O'Brien, we understand, after some consultations with senior officials, which would be appropriate in this case for the National Security Advisor to take this intelligence that had been collected and assessed to the president and speak truthfully to him. It did not go well. We understand that the National Security Advisor made his case, and the president sort of shrugged his shoulders and said, well, that's just Rudy. And making light of it, dismissing the idea that this was some kind of Russian setup or disinformation coming in to the president. And of course, we know that President Trump has frequently listened to the many kinds of lies and disinformation that Rudy Giuliani has told him and has said publicly, and doesn't seem to keep him at arm's length. He, in fact, repeats many of the things, particularly about the Bidens, that come from Rudy Giuliani.
I mean, it's obvious, Rudy Giuliani is not, the person he once was. He certainly feels like he's living his best life and feels very relevant. But is it really possible that Giuliani wouldn't know these people were Russian assets? I mean, in a prior life, he was the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York.
Right. I can't tell what's inside Rudy Giuliani's mind, whether he knew or not. I think you could reasonably suspect that these people would be, and of course some of these individuals were known to have a long track record in some circles as being, if not Russian assets, they were known to be pro-Russian Ukrainian lawmakers, a pro-Russian Ukrainian lawmaker in one case. You would imagine also that the former U.S. attorney might suspect that when he's engaging with such people, his communications might be incidentally collected by U.S. intelligence when they were up on those individuals. There's a lot about Rudy Giuliani's behavior that is just very difficult to understand and explain, particularly why he continues to peddle this information when he knows it's not true.
It's a fascinating article in the Washington Post. Shane Harris, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You bet.
More breaking news tonight. Former President Obama weighing in on roadblocks to early voting as a record number of people have cast their ballots. He tweets, nobody should have to wait 11 hours to vote, but we're all grateful that you and all those in line with you stuck it out. Keep making your voices heard, everybody. Our democracy depends on it. Officials in North Carolina tonight reporting a record number of voters so far in day one of early voting there. You can see one of the lines. Colorado Secretary of State Jenna Griswold tweeted this news out today. As of yesterday, over 300,000 Coloradans have voted, which is 24 times more than at this point in 2016. Secretary Griswold joins us now, along with CNN Chief Political Correspondent Dan Bash. Secretary Griswold, you saw the lines in Georgia, disputes over drop boxes in Texas and California. How do those types of situations compare with what's happening in your state? And I'm wondering, how concerned are you about what's happening in other states?
Well, I think overall, despite the roadblocks that are being put up, Americans are showing up in record numbers. We are seeing record early voting, and I think that's a great thing for our democracy. As a Secretary of State responsible for ensuring all communities have their voices heard, it's important to say that very often voter suppression is systemic racism. And we have to fight against that voter suppression. We have to fight against that racism. And that's one of the reasons in Colorado I've increased drop boxes by 50%. We've increased in-person voting centers, and for the first time are guaranteeing a polling center or drop box at all public universities and tribal lands. If you provide access, people will vote, and all Americans deserve the same rights as Coloradans.
So that it's obviously a different tack than they're taking in Texas, where one drop box per county. That was the reason given by Abbott for that was security concerns. You say you've increased them by 50% in the state. Have you seen any security issues so far?
Absolutely not. Colorado has used drop boxes for many years now, and we have security protocols including videotaping, 24-hour surveillance, and we actually keep all the footage for 25 months. And we have a history of drop boxes working just great. Coloradans really use them. And I will say, at this point in Colorado, we'll have over 383 drop boxes across the state. That's approximately one drop box for every 9,100 people. And what the governor of Texas is doing, taking away access during a pandemic, during such an important election, is voter suppression. Removing access during a pandemic is voter suppression. And that's why I believe we need a national law ensuring that all Americans have access to a mail ballot, hundreds of drop boxes, hundreds of voting centers, online voter registration. We need to make our elections nationwide, modern elections, and really give American citizens the access they deserve.
Dana, the long lines for voting, record numbers, mail-in ballots, which side gets more energized by that?
Well, right now what we are seeing reported from states across the country that are doing this early voting, and also states that are looking at absentee ballots and other means, it looks like Democrats are taking advantage much more than Republicans. Now, that is in large part because you can look at the energy that Democrats have. You can look at the message that you're hearing from the top of the ticket from Joe Biden, from Kamala Harris, and from every Democratic activist out there saying, go vote, go vote, go vote. And I can tell you, Anderson, that Republicans, and we've talked about this before, they are so frustrated with the guy at the top of their ticket because he's making their jobs very difficult. Republicans, from inside the Trump campaign to the RNC, they had worked for months and months and months to try to be on par with Democrats with regard to early voting, with regard to absentee voting. And it's been very difficult to do when the president has been telling his own supporters it's riddled with fraud. I'll just give you an example. Florida, which obviously is among the most, if not the most important state for the president, 11.5% of Democrats who requested absentee ballots returned them, 8.7% of Republicans did. That's bad news for the president, even though they do expect many Republicans to go and show up on election day.
Secretary Griswold, I'm wondering in Colorado, what are you expecting on election day? Because the president, has talked about getting people to be poll watchers, and they've talked about a Trump army deployed on election day, monitoring polling. Are you concerned about what it's actually going to look like?
Well, I think we'll have great elections just like every year. It is illegal under federal law and Colorado law to intimidate voters, and we won't allow any of that to happen. But I do think voters should be confident in voting however they so choose, whether that's a mail ballot or going in person during early voting or on election day. There is a very important role for supporters of both presidential campaigns to sign up as election judges or poll watchers. But they just have to do that in accordance with state law. So we'll have folks from both sides of the aisle through the entire election process. And the one takeaway or the one message that I would send the viewers is if you have the ability